A Steam data leak allowed thousands of games to have their player data information shown.
No way.
Could mean something negative for VR.
Oh, really? Well, I think that's about time for a hot take. So we're going to preface this video before we start anything by basically establishing that, hey, this information is a leak. It's not guaranteed information.
Yeah.
It might not be 100% accurate.
And actually, one of the developers has come out and said, like, hey, the numbers may or may not be real because they can't just outright say whether or not it is.
It's not a denial, but it's not an acceptance of everything being real. But yeah.
So basically what happened was this data leak, it allowed for some achievement information to be displayed to people, and some folks were able to calculate exactly how many people had purchased these games or downloaded them based upon that achievement information.
Yes. So you know when you start up a game and sometimes like as soon as you start the game up in like a certain difficulty mode, you'll get like an achievement that says, congratulations, you earned this. Well, that's what they've done. They've accumulated all that information and brought it down to a basis point where they basically assume that this is the amount of people that have actually downloaded and played these games.
Right. So yes, the numbers are, you know, they could be higher, possibly lower, but maybe not lower.
Yeah. In many cases, people may have bought the games and just not started them up at all, which is a way that this would not be accurate.
Right.
But from what we can tell here, we know that there may at least be this amount of people playing these games and have purchased them.
So yeah, just looking at the numbers, even if they are slightly higher, it is a little bit worrying as far as like VR titles are concerned. We already knew that VR was a world that is... It's tiny, right?
Tiny.
Not everyone is jumping into the VR landscape. So yeah, but I kind of assumed that some of the numbers were a little bit bigger. We do have some of the numbers that we saw, like Rec Room, for example, is one of the biggest games out there for VR. A lot of people playing that on the HTC Vive, and it's doing less than 500,000 downloads,
which is crazy because it's free, right? Like that's one of the biggest things. Even I play Rec Room, and that's because it's one of the free piece of games you can actually get online on Steam.
Even like looking at some of the other sort of like VR headset sellers, like Superhot, the numbers we saw were just under 160K. Fallout VR under 100K. Same thing with Skyrim. So like,
now I would personally believe that. For there's multiple things here that I see on the list. So you can see the most expensive game is like Fallout 4 and Skyrim VR, and those games are under 100. But Superhot VR, which is a game that was basically tailored specifically for the VR experience, and a very fun game at that. That game is earned a couple more sales simply because, well, it was tailored for that one experience, right? And there's also the ability that we're just looking at Steam, so there might be a lot of gamers out there that prefer the VR experience of some of these games on PSVR, right? We're not actually seeing any of that stuff, or even Oculus sales. But with that in mind, let's just talk about VR a little bit because there's a couple of factors that kind of play out in this. So if you have a TV at home and you have a video game console under that TV and you have a couch or a chair, or even if you just, you know, sit on the floor when you're playing a game, you literally have enough space to play that game there. But if you were to use a VR headset, chances are you might not have enough space. Right.
The whole thing kind of, it changes drastically from game to game, right? You can have a seated experience where you're just looking around, or you can have a full room experience like a lot of the HTC Vive titles, right?
Now, see, this is something that I really like. I've played a sit-down VR experience several times, and I've never really been a fan of it. Every time I do it, sometimes I get motion sickness, although literally the time I have done sit-down VR experiences, I've also not enjoyed the games because they just didn't really seem to make good use of the headset. Whenever I've used a full room experience with HTC Vive, that's been the thing that has really worked for me. I always love that experience because I can move around in the world, and typically the games are designed with that in mind. But that does require space.
Right, yeah. And when you have that space, you get that one-to-one practically movement. And yeah, the sort of sickness is reduced. It's less stressful on your body as a whole, right? But like there's just so many barriers, it seems, to get to like the perfect VR experience, right? Because you got to think about like step one is buying the headset and buying the computer, and then you have to kind of get your VR legs, and maybe not every title clicks with you. So yeah, like
it's a lot of weight, you know?
Right.
When you think about buying a video game console, you just go out and and you buy the console. Typically, you already have a TV at home. This is the majority of people out there already have a TV that can run with their video game console. The only time you would have dealt with that in the past couple of years was buying a television that had HDMI in for the newer video game systems. That probably would have been the only time you had to worry about that. But now, if you want the VR experience, not only do you need a PC that can run VR games, but you also need to get the headset. And it's not just the headset. Sometimes there's controllers that are additional, or in the case of the HTC Vive, it's a package. You get the Lighthouse experience as well, where it's basically two sensors that go on either side of the room that kind of triangulate where you are. That is pretty expensive. All in all, it actually costs quite a bit of money to get that. With PSVR, you can buy the console and the system itself, the VR headset, together in a bundle, but it still is pretty expensive. It definitely is twice the cost of actually getting the system by itself.
Right, yeah. And like, a lot of people aren't aware of exactly what you need to buy with what experience, what headset works with what controllers, and like it can be a bit of a jumbled mess if you're not educated going into this, right?
Yeah. So there's been companies out there that have been trying to kind of limit that and make it a lot easier with a single standalone headset. So you're seeing stuff like Oculus had its own free headsets, or like free
the Samsung. Are you talking about just the Samsung Gear?
Samsung Gear VR is its own entity, but there's actually an Oculus model that exists where you just buy the headset and that's it. The problem is with all that stuff, though, is that with a standalone headset, you kind of lose some of the power that you get, and generally when it comes to standalone headsets, there's no room scale experience because it's impossible. They can't have you going around.
You need those cameras.
Yeah. And there's a lot of issues with that when it comes to safety as well. If you're using VR headsets, you need the room to be cleared out, otherwise you're going to bump into things. And believe me, if you have crotch-high desks and you're doing room scale VR, it hurts. It really hurts. I just want everyone to know that if you haven't really experienced that before, it is a painful endeavor. But on top of that, you also have to worry about things that you don't even really think about when it comes to VR. Like, okay, now that I'm playing this VR game, you might lose track of time. This is something that I don't think a lot of people have experienced before, but I've actually sat down to review games like Budget Cuts recently, which we reviewed just on this channel. And Budget Cuts, when I was playing it, I thought I was only playing the game for about an hour. And then that's because I couldn't see any windows, I couldn't see the lights, I was not paying attention to anything outside of the room because I had a screen over my face. And then after like a little while, I realized that I had been in the room for I think it was like 3 or 4 hours, and it was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I didn't even realize that. And that can be a problem for people that are trying to gauge how much time they're spending playing video games and stuff like that. I know that doesn't seem like a huge issue, but at least when you're playing regular video games, if you're by a window, you can tell, oh, look, the sun's still out. That doesn't happen with VR.
Right. I mean, I guess technically you could press a button and have like the OS like come back in and show you or whatever, but
yeah, who's doing that?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like, I guess it just depends, because people may say that they're playing like a regular PC game or like a PS4 game and they get lost within the world. But but there's a big difference between that and having a screen, you know, attached directly in front of your eyes.
Well, that's the thing, right? With Skyrim VR and Fallout VR, that's a game experience where you're going to be spending maybe 20, 40 hours playing a game.
That's where you lose track of time just playing it on a TV alone. And then when you go into VR, the experience can be, you know,
and to be fair, I haven't played every single one of these games on this list, but I have played Job Simulator, I have played Space Pirate Trainer and Arizona Sunshine. I've played a couple of these. Is Super Hot VR one of the best ones, I think?
Yeah.
Some of these games are really tailored for VR, and they feel better in that world. But games like Fallout VR and Skyrim VR, they were other games brought over into this experience. And not to say that they're not worth it, it's just you get a different feel for the game.
I even think about another game that was tailored for VR, which I think both of us didn't really dig all that much. It was for the PS4 VR. I don't know if it's on PC yet. Doom.
Yeah,
VR.
Yeah. That is Doom VR.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
okay.
it is.
So, yeah, even with that experience, where it should be more tailored for a VR focus, like, I mean, the game was built with VR in mind, right? You're like a disembodied sort of like robot.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty much.
It still didn't quite feel right to me, and I still felt a little bit sick by the end of my time.
Well, Doom is fast. Doom is quick.
Oh, yeah, especially the new Doom is like
right?
insanely fast.
And you don't get that with the VFR experience because it's basically bringing it back down to a point of almost like delay.
Right.
With typically when you play with first-person games in VR, which is basically how most VR experiences are in first person, because that's the whole point of the goggles. Essentially, when you play those games, they usually don't have a free movement option. There may be games that offer that, but more often than not, if you use free movement when you're in VR, you'll get motion sickness because your vision's moving while you're standing still. So what they usually use is transport. So that's like
teleportation.
Teleportation.
Yeah.
You look at an area, you aim at it, and then you transport there instantly.
I still don't think that's not the answer.
It's not the answer.
Yeah.
So another trick is what they do is they take your vision and they kind of turn it into a little cone, like you're looking through a pinhole. And then once they've done that, you can move around and you're not going to get sick because it basically tricks your brain into not feeling like you're actually moving. So it's weird. There's all these things you have to concern yourself, and I think that works against them. Like, if someone were to play Fallout 4 right now on PC, on anything, it's done. Right? They get it, they finish it, they know how to play it, they can get it on PS4, they can get it on Xbox One, they get it on PC, they get it. When it comes to VR, though, there's a lot of steps that go in between there and a larger cost bracket.
That's it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, just barrier after barrier, it seems. I want VR to take off because, like, who doesn't want to live and walk in, like, their favorite video game world, right? But I think that the numbers that we are seeing, even if they are a little bit off, they do show that sort of discrepancy between a game that you can just, press play in your Steam profile and begin playing, and having to like place on this whole headset and calibrate it, put up cameras, find controllers and things. Yeah.
I mean, a good solution for Valve specifically to get out of this and to make something that works for them, because I really believe Valve has made the best experience for VR. Not in terms of setting it up, but in terms of gameplay, it really is the best experience. And the best way for them to get out of this is to make a standalone system, one that still retains the room scale experience, and something that's easy for consumers to understand.
Right.
They go to the store, or they go online, and they pick up a box that has everything they need, and they just plug it up, and they're going.
See,
right?
That's what they tried to do with the PSVR, and it's like a very, very lukewarm success, right? It's sold between 2 and 2.5 million units. People are playing it, but it's like I was just looking at the numbers. Like, okay, Skyrim released for VR and on the Switch at the same time, the exact same time. So I was like, oh, like, I don't know, a lot of people have PS4s and a lot of people really love Skyrim. Wouldn't you want to like dive into the world of Skyrim again, even if it is a little bit of an older game? The sales weren't that great. Just over 750,000 sales, and the sales on the Switch were higher than that.
And I think there's a reason for that, though, because like I said, that's a game that's kind of being turned into something that it really wasn't originally. And for standalone experiences, it's a risk for developers to want to make a game that's just basically only VR, because there's an entire market there that's not going to be able to play this game.
Yes.
I think like a big way you look at the PSVR sales, too, is that, they've sold about 2 million, even more than that.
Yeah.
But it's just like with Kinect originally. When they showed off the Kinect and they sold quite a few of them, but they didn't make games that really took advantage of that experience, and the games that did never seemed to really work that well. I think VR games tend to work a lot better, but when you look at PSVR, the experience you get from that is definitely a step down compared to what you get with the HTC Vive.
Right.
Tracking's a little bit
You're not
off.
getting room scale with that, right?
You're not getting room scale. You do get standing experiences where you can move around a little bit, but the tracking can be off. The resolution of the screen apparently is good, but the console isn't incapable of actually producing those that really good feel on it. Yeah.
Do you know if you can use multiple cameras with the PSVR as well?
No, it's only one.
Yeah.
What's really funny, though, about the PlayStation VR, despite the fact that it's one of the cheapest, easiest ways to get in VR, that headset is by far one of the most comfy headsets.
Right, yeah.
Like, when you put it on, it feels like it's just floating in front of your face.
It's like a cap, like a solid cap, and you just dunk.
Yeah, like, leave it to Sony to know how to actually make hardware that's good, right?
They make hardware.
Yeah. So they made something that actually stood out, but what's unfortunate is some of the ways that you interact with PSVR, those are older experiences. All that is just a PlayStation Move controller, which definitely shouldn't have been the way they went with this. The way that it tracks isn't used with complex sensors. It's used with a bright LED ball or LED lights on your controller or whatever, or even your headset, and it's just tracking that.
Basically, it's the PS Move software reintegrated into VR. So yes, it's a last-gen tech.
Yes,
basically,
pretty much. And And I think that can actually, it doesn't work all that well because it kind of loses some of the, the hard experience that people are looking for.
We're getting better controllers, but those better controllers are coming with systems that aren't as accessible. Like the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift. They have these wonderful controls, and even just using the HTC Vive, man, it's like it's one-to-one, and you can pick up the controller and things, but it's a better experience. But again, there are those barriers to stop like John Q. Public from going out and getting it if they're not that involved in the gaming world.
And it's funny too because the actual controls that were created originally for PlayStation Move, they were probably good for its time. I remember when they came out and I actually tried it out, and I thought it was neat, but I never really found like any games that really took huge advantage of it. But the control setup didn't make sense in the context of VR because there's actually not enough buttons on there. You're missing some kind of inputs, points of input that could help you. Like with HTC Vive, the way that they've done it is that there's these little pads on the back that allow you to actually do movement, scrolling
like in
and stuff.
The Steam controller.
Yeah, and that was a smart move for that. It made way more sense in terms of VR than it did with the Steam control implementation of it. But that's one of the funny things. We didn't get that with PSVR, so there's a lot of gamers out there that are getting PSVR thinking this is the primary experience because it's probably their first introduction into VR outside of stuff they get from cell phones, and it just doesn't deliver upon the promise that you're getting with HTC Vive, which is way too expensive as it is.
Right.
I think that in order for this really to be expensive, to be successful, everyone has to bring their costs a lot more down. But even at that point, even if the prices, let's say you could go out and get a whole VR experience.
Because the prices are going down, but they're not.
I know. But let's say you could get. Let's just do the best example. HTC Vive, $300.
Yeah.
All right, and that includes everything. You get the headset, you get the system, you get everything. HTC Vive at $300. Do you think it would be successful?
Here's what I think. I think if we want to see VR become a success, I think we almost need like a one headset, one set of controllers approach. Maybe not necessarily, it's always exactly the same, but like there's certain schematics are always the same between each headset.
So it's like televisions, right?
Exactly.
Everyone has there's like the formats that everyone adopts to.
Maybe one's a little more comfortable. Maybe the fidelity of the screen's a little bit better or something. But I feel like, yes, if it's one sort of integrated idea, like you were saying with TVs, it may be a little bit easier for people to jump off and into that. I mean, they are kind of sort of trying that because no one really knows how to win VR.
Well, that's the problem.
Right? So the controls are kind of the same, but they're not.
It is.
They're not the same.
What you're saying is the exact problem that happened. As soon as VR started up, it wasn't all these companies getting together to work together. It was each one going, if we own this, it's ours, right? And that's exactly the dumb move that they would take, right?
That's the problem.
And so you actually do have these three completely different methods, actually more than that.
And they're each walled off gardens, right? Because even though Oculus and HTC Vive, you can do some finagling to have those systems work together.
But it's not like an average consumer
thing.
The
HTC Vive seems to be the most open to being accessible to everything, right? And then the other two are just kind of in the wings, like, oh no, this is my playground. You're not supposed to be here.
It's true. It's really unfortunate, but nobody made an open standard, right? So there is there is a VR open standard that does exist. However, none of the companies like Oculus really got on board with it, and they basically just threw it to the wayside, which was so dumb because we needed everybody to make the same experiences and then maybe offer one additional feature here or there, which would have made it better. Yeah,
it wouldn't be a problem. So what I'm thinking is basically if they had that sort of integrated headset that can be a little bit different but still play the same games in kind of the same way, have a lower price point, and then you can maybe start getting some sort of momentum there. But bottom line, software.
Yeah. You need the games to sell it. Personally, if the way I see it, if they actually go with the $300 and they got something to that price and it was an all-included object, you bought it and you got VR right away, even at that point, unless it's an open VR standard or something like that, you're still going to have issues because you're still going to have games that are not made for the exact same platform. And unfortunately, they were looking at this like it was video game consoles, and that was a complete mistake. But folks, what do you think? Do you think that VR has a future, or do you think that maybe it doesn't? I know that we're basically talking a lot of doom and gloom here, but I don't think Sony, or I definitely don't think Oculus or Valve is going to be walking away from this anytime soon. I think they're all going to be dumping way too much money into it, and Valve has even said that they're still going to be making VR games, so we'll see what happens.